Joining me now, John Sipher, former senior CIA officer and co-founder of Spycraft Entertainment. John, welcome back to the show. And here's the thing. You spent decades working in the CIA, in the National Clandestine Service, of course. Do you expect Trump to weaponize the CIA? I mean, what's to stop him?
Well, actually, there's not a lot to stop him because our intelligence agencies are given a lot of latitude legally, to work for presidents and under presidents. And in the last administration, he did in some ways. When Richard Grenell was in there or when John Radcliffe, they were oftentimes cherry picking intelligence to try to help Trump or help Trump's campaign. But it could get very much worse this time. There's a narrative that they've created, the sense that somehow these institutions work against the president, and it's clearly false. The institutions, the FBI, the CIA, the intelligence community in general, work for the president of the United States and for American citizens to collect intelligence abroad. And so I really hope that they take it seriously and they put serious people in there, because they're very powerful institutions and they can create a lot of problems for us if they're used for personal or partisan gain.
Okay, then let's get to this, because there are reports that Trump will appoint MAGA loyalist Kash Patel, who served as chief of staff to Trump's former Secretary of Defense, Christopher Miller. He would be appointing him as CIA director. What do you know about Patel, and how would his appointment potentially as CIA director affect the agency?
Well, I think most professionals would find a real problem with this, because he's someone who doesn't have experience in the intelligence community. He doesn't really have experience in the national security community, but he does have experience doing whatever Donald Trump tells him to do. And that really is not what you want in your intelligence community. What you want is telling truth to power. You want to prepare presidents for hard decisions. They may want their preconceived notions to be reaffirmed, but that's not what you want in your intelligence community. You want them to tell you and give you warnings about things that you might not be seeing. But people like Kash Patel, they will be there only to help Donald Trump. They'll be looking for information to help him personally. They'll be looking to cover up information that they think might be embarrassing to him. And so I would find that to be a very serious danger, and I think most professionals would as well.
But John, I mean, in his second term, it appears that Trump is focused on appointing people who follow marching orders and will not stand in his way, because he did not like it when staffers pushed back during his first term. So, game that out in terms of what it means for our national security.
Yeah, I mean, he was unprepared last time. He didn't know much about governing, wasn't much interested in governing, tried to bring in people, professionals, or at least people who were serious, and obviously got some pushback, and he didn't like that. And it's very clear he's going to bring people who are far, far more on the MAGA right and will do what he wants. And, the government is this massive, complex instrument that does tremendous amount of things for the economy and for national security and those other kind of things. And, having partisan loyalists in those places in Justice Department and others can be really problematic. But in a place like the intelligence community, it's especially a problem, because those organizations are very, very powerful. And from 1947, when the CIA was created, until the 70s, they were often used as sort of personal weapons of presidents. And they covered up their failures, and the FBI under J. Edgar Hoover was doing warrantless wiretapping of people like Martin Luther King and others. And in the 1970s, there was reforms, and they put in serious congressional oversight. They put in new laws, and subsequent administrations have tried to make sure that our national security organizations are very tightly run and very focused on what they need to do. And if they are turned to try to focus against the American people, or if they are filled with non-professionals, it could be very, very dangerous. The CIA now has one person who is a political appointee, the director. Everyone else are professionals who spend years and years trying to learn their craft. If you just throw those people out and you bring in unprepared partisans, you've really lost something that's been building for decades and decades.
So to that end, given the critical nature of intelligence sharing with intel agencies around the world, key allies, would some become reluctant to share with Trump in charge again? How that could compromise national security? You think it might?
Oh, I'm sure it would. I would guess that of the clandestine service, we work with foreign partners around the world, places you wouldn't even think of, that help us day-to-day basis. We're there every day working with them, developing relationships, developing trust, and sharing information. Countries share information that could be very, very damaging to them if it came out, that are very beneficial to the United States and has saved lives. If they see the U.S. intelligence community and the CIA being unprofessional or being staffed by people who aren't serious or only looking to benefit the President of the United States' political or personal issues, they are going to stop sharing with us. And the thing is, we won't even know it. They'll smile, they'll continue to go out with us and have drinks and do those things, but they're not going to share their most secrets, their most important secrets. And it's going to end up, hurting us national security-wise and probably even losing lives because of it.
Oof. Sobering, John Sipher. We'll speak with you again, no doubt. Thank you.